It crops up in the news with increasing frequency, often because of some scandal involving a politician or a celebrity. I'm referring to sexual addictions. This is a real issue that doesn't just affect famous people. It can and does cause the downfall of many relationships. What is a sexual addiction, and how does it develop? That's today's topic on Family Matters.
Brought to you by AdviceScene.com. Free legal answers from verified lawyers.
Sexual addiction. What are the signs you should look for if you suspect that a partner or a loved one has this problem? What's the impact on relationships and families when a parent is suffering from a sexual addiction? And what help is available for addicts and their partners? Later in the show, I'll be speaking to psychologist Andrew McWhinnie, who specializes in male sexual health and treats men who are addicted to internet pornography. But first, I'm pleased to welcome psychologist Doris Vincent, who specializes in the treatment of sex addictions, and also joining us is Cathy Patterson-Sterling, who runs innovative workshops and intensive therapy programs for people with addictions. Thank you both very, very much for being here on Family Matters. I want to ask you, Doris, what is a sexual addiction?
A sexual addiction is an obsession with sex and an inability to control or to stop one or more sexual behaviors.
Do women have this problem in addition to men? Because we often hear about it in the context of men.
We don't know what the incidence is really. Women are very reluctant to come to treatment.
So we don't know.
We really don't know. We don't actually know about men in the population either. Statistics vary from a very conservative 5 to 6% to there's a Canadian study done on with I think it's 117 men. They found a percentage that was close to 18%.
Well, Cathy, you deal with a community agent. You run a community agency that services people with all kinds of addictions. Are you running into people with sexual addictions?
Definitely, yes. We have a whole cross-section of people with multiple addictions. There's behavior addictions as well as chemical addictions. When you look at a brain under an imaging scan, whether you're sexually intensely aroused, whether you're gambling, or whether you're under the influence of cocaine, it's lighting up the same areas of the limbic system. It's chasing that high. So whether we do that through a chemical or behavior, doesn't matter.
So an addictive personality is basically the same no matter what the addiction is, whether it's gambling or sex or drugs or alcohol?
There's acting out behavior, yes, yeah. And you can mood alter through chemicals by taking those in or by acting that out.
The difference would be whether you're looking for something that's an excitement high and you're looking for something sexually that's exciting and has an edge, and cocaine, or whether you're looking for something that is calming and quieting, like compulsive masturbation, and that's more like people who would be into the opiates. So,
but we hear, we in the legal field hear and are often told that an addiction is really an escape from something, from some other problem. Is that the case as well with sexual addictions?
Well, sexual addictions, I think, like other addictions, have their basis in what we call complex developmental trauma. And that is the human infant requires so much emotional support and contact with the caretaker very often that is not optimum. And what happens is that affects the development of the brain. It affects the dopamine centers in the brain. It affects the functionings of the prefrontal cortex. It affects the amount of oxytocin. It affects brain development. And the brain is left unable to manage itself, unable to feel comfortable. It's overreactive in some areas, underreactive in some areas. So we're left with a being that's looking for a way to feel better.
But why sex?
It's a way of self-regulating. It's having a tunnel vision of focus and escape. And people with addictions they have their real life, and then they build this escape life that overtowers and implodes. And that's why we're seeing so many people in the media.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, has this always existed? Because I don't remember when I was younger hearing about this, and yet now there's one scandal after another with famous people taking huge risks and bringing about their own downfall.
Well, there's a couple things. There's the basis that I talked about. Then there's one would call a serendipitous event. A child discovers pornography. They're already stressed. The pornography, the sex, calms them down. And so it's a serendipitous effect.
And that's a big issue, isn't it? That some parents do not adequately supervise their children on the internet, and they get exposed to adult material that they should not at all be seeing. We see this in court.
It's very, very true. So,
and can that cause a child to be disturbed?
It certainly affects their developing sexuality, and it begins to interact with their stress response system and their dopamine system. And if they keep using it, they may start abusing it.
It's a bid to self-regulate. It's feeling normal, calming, and...
Well, this is a big eye-opener for parents. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to be asking our guests why so many prominent people seem to take unbelievably foolish risks. Don't miss it. We'll be back right after this break. Welcome back to our discussion of sexual addictions with two leading experts in this field. I want to ask what I've been dying to ask. Why do famous people take stupid risks and ruin their lives?
Well, I don't have them as clients, but I have had clients who've had just too much opportunity, too many women, too much opportunity.
Is it power?
It's exciting, it's a thrill, it's a sexual conquest. It's the same reason why somebody shoplifts. That's why in the media, you'd seen somebody who was famous, who has money to buy something. It's the chase, the exhilaration, the high that you hold in your mind.
And no judgment about risk. I don't get it. But I want to really spend the rest of our time together talking about treatment. I was going to ask you about how you know if you have a sexual addiction. I think you've told me that people who have it know they have it, and they seek out the help.
Yes, they do.
But if you do want to know, there's a website where you can go and fill out a questionnaire and see whether you fall on the risk. I'm going to tell you, I did it, and halfway through the questionnaire, I broke into a horrible sweat and stopped.
Well, that's because some of the questions, none of those questions, except the ones about control, are really specifically indicative of addiction.
Well, just give us the website so that if people want to go. It's the number of yeses. That was my mistake.
It's the number.
Well, what's the website?
If they go to my website, which is recoverypath.ca, and look under resources for addicts, they can take the test.
But don't answer too many yeses and you'll be okay. No, tell me about treatment. I shouldn't be making light of this. It's a serious topic. And actually the media does make light of it and scandalizes it. And I don't want to, but couldn't help it. Tell me about treatment. How do they get help?
They need two things. They need a therapist and they need to go to 12-step.
Is it easy to find a therapist with this kind of specialization?
No, but there are more and more people are taking training.
Do you get your doctor to refer you to a specialist?
You can go online. You can go online to sash.net. You can go online to, if you just go to my website, you'll find resources where you can find therapists.
What about the treatment itself, the 12 steps? How long does this take?
Well, the 12 steps is a lifetime.
It's a lifetime.
It's a commitment to a way of thinking and a way of looking at your life. And it's similar to AA, so that's something that they do on their own.
Is that how you deal with it, Cathy? It's you see this as a lifetime challenge?
It's a number of things. It's symptomatic of a bunch of core issues, and in our intensive programs, we really like to get to what those core issues are. Also, a person with a sex addiction is going to have to learn intimacy again. They're acting out in the sex addiction. You get to a certain level of pursuing a high, and then you become desensitized. So normal sex just doesn't work for you anymore. Emotional intimacy and connection, it's about chasing the high. So you've got to relearn that again.
But to me, it's different. I mean, if you were an alcoholic or a drug addict, the goal is to not ever take it. You know, alcoholics shouldn't have any alcohol at all. Yeah. But it is healthy to have sex, some sex.
And when you
so you have to know how to modulate it, I guess.
Yes, balance. And when you look at all of addictions, it's about going through feelings rather than around feelings, and how we mood alter and build this escape life. It's having the feeling, your gifts of your feelings and emotions, and moving through and making the commitment to doing life and working through your issues.
So it's intensive counseling.
Yes.
I would like to ask you, Cathy and Doris, what's the impact on families? Because we've been talking about the addict as though they're in some kind of a vacuum, a balloon, but they're living in a family unit. What do you see with the family? I know what I see in court.
Yeah. When you're dealing with addictions across section, for the partner, family member, loved one, it feels like they've been chosen over. Like the person who has your back and is supposed to be your team member in life has tossed you under the bus. And there's an extreme, profound sense of emotional abandonment. And then there's all these behaviors that go with this. So that as a partner, I have this feeling kind of breathing like this, and I don't know if I relax. I'm always in anticipatory anxiety and fear. If I relax, then when's the other shoe going to drop, right? So I've got to work on my trust issues, also getting some safety and stabilization in this, and rebuilding that connection and teamwork.
And I guess like the white elephant in the room here is that if we're talking about a person who has a sexual addiction, we are also talking about infidelity.
Yes.
They're not necessarily having this compulsive sexual behavior with their partner.
No, and in our society, that's technologically influenced as well. So emotional affairs and having sexting and talking on the internet with strangers and that type of thing, that's part of the pursuing of the high and the sexual conquest without any physical contact.
So a treatment plan doesn't just involve the addict, it involves their partner and possibly their children if they've been traumatized by inappropriate exposure to sexual content.
But I think when it comes to the children, what's important is that the addict talks to the children in an age-appropriate way, so the child at least understands what the difficulty, you know, that maybe he says, well, I lied to your mom, and that's why we're having some time apart. Or if the child is older, they may also have seen some of this. They may have seen dad on the internet or making surreptitious phone calls, and they need to know what it's all about.
And the emotional atmosphere in the family as well, because it's tension. It's like walking on eggshells for the whole family.
Absolutely.
And in the healing, it's knowing the parents are back on their healing track, in charge, and the kids are okay, we're safe, we're working through our stuff.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. I want to thank our guests, Cathy Patterson-Sterling and Doris Vincent. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this very, very important topic. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm pleased to welcome now Andrew McWhinnie, who is a counselor who specializes in male sexual health. And you're an expert in internet addictions to pornography.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you for your reaction to the first two segments. Any comments?
I think that addressing these kinds of behaviors as an addiction is too simple. Look, we're faced with an epidemic at this point in society.
This is an epidemic?
Epidemic in society, North American society, European society, around the globe. And it started in 1994 with the advent of pornography being available on the internet. Clients will come to me today and say, you know, I've had the routine run-of-the-mill look at Playboy and those sorts of things, no problem. But, oh my gosh, when I found out what's available on the internet, it was like pouring white gas on fire. Yes, we're dealing with something that is of epidemic proportions, and to call it simply an addiction, go to a 12-step program, is way too simple.
Why? Well, what is it? If it's not an addiction, what do you call it?
There's a whole sort of panoply of core behaviors, I think, that people should be addressing in treatment, to beginning with intimacy deficits, beginning with problems using their sexuality for a coping device, social skill development, all of those sorts of areas that need to be talked about, including things like potentially depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, all those sorts of things, which are comorbid to behaviors that get primarily men, into trouble with their sexual behavior.
But my understanding is that people can be quite highly functional. I mean, we've seen movie stars and politicians get into trouble. I don't have to name them. We all know who they are. I think it's surprising to hear that these people have a lot of other disorders going on at the same time, and yet they're so high functioning.
Well, I think movie stars and public professionals, actors are first of all normal people struggling with normal behaviors, and our cameras are pointed at them all the time. So unfortunately, sadly for them, they sort of bear the weight of what the rest of us are having to put up with in our lives. Yes,
but they're high achievers.
They're functioning at certain levels, but with impairment. And that impairment becomes increasingly difficult for them to manage in their lives and to continue to function at the levels that they're functioning at.
So when you, by saying that this is not an addiction that cannot be treated by simply a 12-step program, how do you treat your patients?
I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with, so I'll be working with other professionals in the area, other psychologists, other psychiatrists, and medical doctors to find out what's actually going on with this person. Number one of the comorbid diseases that works with difficulty with a person's sexual behavior is depression, quite common. People who come in, they're not happy with their lives, they're not happy with what they're doing with their lives, and they're depressed.
Is that why they turn to the internet for kind of gratification, to just feel better?
For escape, perhaps, yes. But that's just simply a symptom of the other things that are going on in their life.
Is there a tendency to be, does this afflict people that are in relationships more than people that are single?
You know, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know, I haven't collected any data in terms of, and data is a really good thing to talk about, on whether it's single people or not single people, or people in relationships or not. But it affects everybody, including relationships, and it's probably most tragic in relationships.
Does it affect women? I know you only treat men, but do women have this problem?
I work with couples, but primarily men. Probably
Why?
80 to 80, because male sexuality sort of works that way. It's more predatory than female sexuality.
Haven't you ever heard of a cougar?
I certainly have heard of a cougar, and
I've met some pretty predatory women in my time.
And we're talking,
not that it's done me much good, but I don't get that.
But we're talking about generalities, right? We're not talking about, well, there's an incident here or an incident there. 80% of the people who report difficulty with their sexual behavior, otherwise known as addictions, which I'm disputing, are men. Probably 10 to 15% of people who show up for treatment are women who have those difficulties as well.
Well, let me ask you then. I get this all the time. I think you know that a person who has an obsession, this can really affect the whole family. And when a family breaks down, and we in court hear very sad stories, but I often hear men say, what's the big deal? At least I'm not screwing around. I haven't been unfaithful. I'm not bringing home any diseases to my wife. I haven't been with anyone else. Why is this so terrible? What's your answer to that?
Excuses, excuses, excuses. There's something else going on in that person's life besides the fact that they're behaving inappropriately with their sexual behavior. If we talk about sexual addictions, we erase from the discussion two directions that we might want to consider in terms of treating somebody with difficulty with their sexual behavior. Number one are the well-known areas of paraphilias. Those are behaviors that are destructive of other people and in some cases deviant and illegal. And the other area that we don't address is normative sexual behavior that has got out of hand, that the person is using to assuage some other thing that's going on in their life. Number one, in almost every man that I treat in my office are problems with intimacy. I'll ask men, so intimacy.
You mean with their partners?
No, yes, with anybody. Just the concept of intimacy. If I ask a man, what does intimacy mean for you? The first thing that they're going to say is, well, sex. And we know that you know, intimacy with another human being, that sort of deep level connection with another human being,
On an emotional level.
on an emotional, psychological, even spiritual level, is something that's very, very necessary for survival of the species, which is why you can't call sex an addiction, because it's necessary for the survival of the species. Alcohol, cocaine, drugs, those sorts of things, we can get rid of those, and in fact the 12-step programs do a very, very good job of treating those kinds of addictions.
But your methodology is a very intensive therapy.
It can be intensive or not, depending on the client. I'm not going to say, I think, that everybody that comes to see me needs to see me for the next 5 years in intensive, get down, even residential kinds of treatment. It's very focused. It's very focused and intense at
I'm
times.
going to play the devil's advocate here in case there's somebody at home watching this saying, why doesn't the person just throw away their computer? Like, just unplug the damn thing.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
They haven't dealt with their core issues. So even if they could throw away the computer, they're going to turn to something else.
What would it be?
Who knows? It might be another addiction like drugs or alcohol. Sometimes those things are happening anyway.
So if that problem that's bubbling up inside someone doesn't get fixed, it's going to surface somewhere else.
Remember what I was saying about intimacy, though. That's a huge field to deal with. A person who doesn't know how to make that connection, is afraid of of those kinds of connections, doesn't have the social skills necessary to make those kinds of connections.
And that's why I thought it would be intensive therapy, because I would think that an adult who has trouble with intimacy has had a long-standing issue with bonding, attachment. Yeah. And I can't imagine you'd overcome that quickly or easily.
No, it's not quick, it's not easy, and there are times when it's going to be intensive. It really is, but not in every case.
Well, I've got to ask you this, given that you've really surprised me when you've said it's an epidemic, because I know that internet pornography is widespread.
Yes.
The availability of it is massive. Anybody knows that. I didn't know, though, that the problem was so widespread. And I wondered, do you think the media has dealt with this issue in an appropriate way? Because I always see this tongue-in-cheek coverage, this topic.
Yeah, I know. I mean, even earlier today we're saying that, you know, there's some statistic roaming around that says that, I don't know, 60% of men have viewed pornography on their work computer. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's 99%. Maybe it's most men. It's a new field. It's something that we don't know very much about. Any of the research is there, including the neurobiological research, is animal-based. There is not one piece of evidence that deals with human reactions to these sorts of things. The media and programs like this are doing a good job in putting good information out there. Sensationalizing it and saying, oh, look at Tiger Woods, or oh, look at these people, you know, they're sex addicts, is not a good coverage of what the issues are.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You've given us a lot of food for thought on this fascinating topic. From all of us here at Family Matters, thank you very much for watching. See you next time.